you won't thank me for bringing this up, but with White-Povetkin's rematch being postponed to next year and Callum Smith-Canelo presumably heading to the Zone, it means of the biggest 3 UK fights in the last quarter of the year, Sky have only got one, Joshua Pulev. This is a not unprecedented situation, but certainly hasn't been the case for a number of years. There's real competition now, it seems, in the UK.
Danny, I'll always answer any questions you throw at me. You know that. It's look, we've got our plans, and I've made them very clear. Is that boxing came back. It wasn't the first sport back. We're a multi-channel sports outfit with 11 channels, where during the first lockdown, there was very little fresh sport. It was virtually all sort of debate shows and recaps of great nights. So, we had to get back with the Premier League. That was obviously the all-important one, with Formula One, with the golf majors, with cricket, with all sorts we've come back with. And boxing's part of that mix. And I'm really proud of the way we came back with Fight Camp, which was something that Eddie and Frank dreamt up. It was innovative, it was new, it was a great operation, and I'm really pleased with the ascent of women's boxing, particularly since lockdown. There's been some fantastic fights and great nights, and we are, we've put 2 Sky Sports box office shows on already, White-Povetkin and Katie Taylor against Delphine Persoon, then the Usyk Chisora fight, and now we've got a third one, and of course, as you say, Povetkin White delayed to next year. So the fact that BT did a pay-per-view of sorts with Tyson and against Jones, which was obviously an exhibition and one that we were all a bit skeptical about and sort of watching behind the couch. But, really at 10 o'clock at night is the time to do, big box office events in Britain. And we are the only broadcaster that are doing that. BT were going to do that with Tyson Fury, but for whatever reason, they're not. And so, we get a lot of flack. We get a lot of stick at Sky because we're not putting on some of the international fights at the moment, despite the fact that people forget we've done huge amounts of international fights over huge amounts of years and have always stayed in boxing when others have drifted in and out. We've been loyal to the core. But this year, obviously, like every company, we have to look at what we can spend and what we can't. And obviously, operational, organizational stuff in America is now impossible at the moment. So it's very difficult, and we've got to make choices. And our choice is to be with Matchroom, our UK partner and our partner for a long time, our partner in many sports, and to make the best shows we can this side of the pond. And it's not always possible to have everything. DAZN are launching this week. They're launching a global product, which is exciting for them. I talked to Joe Markowski a lot about it, and it's something they were planning earlier in this year, and now they're going with it. So look, they've got an interesting lineup. Of course, they've got a really good fight in Canelo and Callum Smith. They've got Golovkin. They're going to have Ryan Garcia and Luke Campbell, and it's simple. We just don't have the money to throw around, and there's huge. Canelo had the rights for the Callum Smith fight, and it's not a fight that we could financially look at the moment. And it's a difficult one because, people say, oh, you do too many box office events. But then, if we'd done Callum Smith against Canelo box office the week after AJ, which is probably the only way we could have done, and whether we would have got ratings at 4 a.m, who knows? But if you do a fight of that caliber, then it's a week after Anthony Joshua's box office event, so it's not really fair. So the Povetkin White fight goes away for a while. So you've got a clear run, lots of Sky Sports shows, and then one box office event, which we understand, customers have to pay for, and it's tough and it's tough times. So we're not sort of, over-egging the box office events, which is important. We're doing them when we feel it's right. And these are just fights. They're international fights with British fighters, and very, very good fights. But, unfortunately, they are still a little bit tradey as well. And they're fights that we all get very excited about. But ultimately, Callum Smith's very popular in Liverpool and very popular in the trade. But, there's not many casual football fans out there, that if you walk around London that would know much about Callum. And I think, or maybe not even much about Canelo. So that's slightly the issue, I would say. But yeah, it's down to finances, and you've got to make choices. And our contracts with Matchroom. Matchroom are our promoters, no one else. We've got to deal with Matchroom. It's just, they've helped us at times when we've gone to other, obviously we've got the golden contract as well. We've done run through Matchroom, which is, got the final on, or the finals on Wednesday, tomorrow night, which are really exciting. And, that's been good. And it's been good to have some independent stuff. We bought the Super 6 Series final, and we bought the Super Series final, not the Super 60. That was a while back. We bought that as well. So we try and bring some independent stuff. Last year, we had some Wilder fights. We had the Spence Porter fight that I was over for. So, we try in an ideal world, as I would love to have had Lomachenko and Lopez, or Davis and Santa Cruz, or Campbell and Garcia, or Callum and Canelo. I want to have them all. I'd love to do them all, but we just can't. And it's a business, and we're in not just a sports business. We're in a Sky and a Comcast business where there's lots of other things. The biggest thing that was talked about this week was The Undoing and Sky Atlantic, and how well that's done as a show, and how gripped we've all been with that. So there's other things to look at apart from sport, and certainly apart from boxing. But we've got the Anthony Joshua return, which is our huge heavyweight night this year. Obviously, Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder was massive back in February, and BT did a great job with that, and I loved being out there, and that was one of the great wins by any British fighter on foreign soil, I thought, with Tyson Fury. A shame that Fury's not back in the ring before the end of the year, and we can't wait to ultimately see the Joshua Fury double act if we can get that. But first of all, Anthony's got a big fight to get through against Kubrat Pulev. So unfortunately, no, we didn't have Joyce and Dubois. We don't have Callum and Canelo, but we've got plenty of others. We've got a good Golden Contract final. We've got Billy Joe and Martin Murray. We've got Anthony Joshua, Lawrence Okoli. We've got lots of other heavyweight fights that night. Ramla Ali back as well. And then January, we've got some really good plans. So what I like is that, that there's a lot of broadcasters now that are involved in boxing. There was a time, Danny, where you and I just talked about what was on Sky, and unfortunately there wasn't much other competition. It's really good that BT have come in. It's really good that there's Fight and Premiere, and Channel 5 have got a good show coming up. Lots happening, and I think that's really good for fight fans. So despite the fact that we haven't got everything, that's just the way it is at the moment, and we just want to make sure that what we do we do best, and we'll make sure we do that.
While you rightly point out it's great for boxing fans, which is what we both are at our core, that these broadcasters have come in, BT developing, of course, the Zone launching. From a Sky perspective, with your Sky boxing hat on, this must be the most challenged you've been in terms of competition since you went the monopoly route with Matchroom.
Possibly, yes. It's a good point. I mean, you look back through the years, and when I started, we had a contract with Matchroom. We were doing fights like I don't know, who was it, Ampofo and Fifield at the York Hall, and we had a deal with Chris Eubanks Senior, a sort of a world tour where I think we didn't go much around the world. We went to Whitley Bay, Cardiff. There was one, I think, in South Africa, but
one in Egypt.
County Cork, no, Egypt, I think, was later. County Cork was good. That was great for Mill Street, for Steve Collins. Yeah, that was great. But yeah, I mean, look, even back then, we had some boxing, and then of course we brought Frank Warren on, and that was a huge move with the Don King sort of link, and then it was Frank Maloney and Ricky Hatton, Mick Hennessy. We had huge amounts. So Matchroom was sort of a bit part player until Eddie came through and sort of took over, and then we decided to, Frank wanted to start Box Nation. He wanted more shows, and we felt that if we went with one promoter and sort of made sort of smaller hall shows into sort of arenas, into big stadium shows, that was the way to go forward. And Frank delivered big shows for us, but there were a lot of other small shows too amongst all the promoters. And I think that boxing needed tidying up in a way, and it needed more appeal. It needed more sort of enjoyment from fans on the night, music, entertainment, celebs, glamour, all that. It came at a time when social and digital was exploding too, and then big fights were made. Good narratives like Froch and Groves, Mayweather Pacquiao was made, albeit too late. But lots of things were happening at the same time. And of course, the London Olympics in 2012 brought us Anthony Joshua, Katie Taylor, Nicola Adams, Luke Campbell. So it was really good times, and I think that sort of spearheaded us through. But you've got to remember that Setanta dipped their toes in. We had ITV Digital, we had BBC. Where are all they? What's happened to ITV box office? What's happened to Box Nation? What's happened to BT? BT are involved. What's happened to ITV and BBC? BT have done very well, with Frank in the last 2 or 3 years. And I think when BT announced that with Frank, Eddie went, "Oh my God, have you seen that?" And I went, "Brilliant. It's competition. we love competition. We embrace competition. And, I laugh and joke with Joe Markowski all the time and the guys over at DAZN. We had a nice working relationship with them for a couple of years when we took quite a lot of their shows. But of course, now they're in our territory. They're coming in. They're rivals. And, we embrace that. We like our rivals. I chat with Steve Bunce and John Rawling and all that. And I've done interviews with Frank over lockdown. Sometimes you have to realize we're all in this business together and, everybody's trying their hardest. And sometimes you need a bit of us watching them, and that's good. It's good to raise our game. There's some wonderful features on Saturday night that, my guys were saying, wow, they were good, and there were some things we didn't like about the BT show. So there's things to learn from watching the other competitions. So I embrace it. I'm looking forward to seeing how DAZN do in the coming weeks and months, and I'm making sure that we get our shop in order. And the key point is, Danny, is that you say we're under, pressure, or certainly there's more competition than ever before. We are part of a huge sports arsenal at Sky. BT have similarly, they have football and rugby, etc. DAZN are, putting all their sort of efforts certainly in our area or in America to boxing. Yes, they've got other, rights around the world, but they don't have many rights in Britain. We have got a lot of rights, and those rights are key, whether it's the Premier League at the top or, the EFL or the cricket or the golf or the Formula One or the NFL or the darts or every other sport we have. Boxing's a part of that. That it's a big night when it's a big box office event like AJ, when it's a huge night like for women's sport like Katie Taylor had recently, and we got 2 million views by putting it, out on Facebook and on YouTube, things like that. That's when you stop traffic at Sky. But other times it's just good, solid trade fights. And unfortunately, we just can't do everything. We don't have the scheduling time. Remember, the gap of sport in the sort of first half of the year means that a lot of it's been sort of bootlegged into the back end of 2020, the beginning of 2021. So you're fighting for air times. You've got to make sure that, we choose our slots carefully. When we know we're going to get good viewers, we go on the back of big football matches. So we try and, attract more casual fans to boxing. Conor Benn did huge numbers the other week, which was fantastic. And, that's all part of the sort of planning, strategy, scheduling, which goes hand in hand with what our contracts say. So, we work very hard at getting what we do as polished and as sparkling as we can. Would we like to do more? Of course, but we can't do more. So we're, at the moment, we just got to do what we can, and we carry on, and that's we watch what the others do as well. And as I said, we embrace the competition, we fight it, we look at it, we love it, we hate it, all of that. But the best thing is we're watching everything, aren't we? That everybody's got a chance to watch these fights. And I think everybody across the world, whether it's in Germany, whether it's in America, whether it's here, have done exceptionally well, whether it's our friends at Top Rank, whether it's the PBC. I speak to Araceli Villas and Todd DeBerth, and everybody's done really well, during a pandemic to bring boxing back with no gates. God, we're hoping to get some fans in for Anthony Joshua, which will be brilliant. But ultimately, it's been so hard this year to make big fights without the gate money. And that's why actually my hats go off to Eddie and to Frank. For Frank for putting on that Joyce Dubois fight with no crowd, and for Eddie for putting on multiple big fights without a crowd. And, here's another one with Saunders and Murray, then Joshua and Pulev. You never have thought of it. When was it? When Joshua, 2017, 3 years ago, when Joshua and Klitschko fought just behind us at the stadium, would you ever have thought he'd be fighting in front of, a few people at the arena? It wasn't possible then, was it?
It all seems surreal, I imagine.
It does.
You've kind of done the segue for me into Joshua Pulev, and particularly the price point. I watched the interview you did with Rob Tebbett on Boxing Social. Not the whole interview, I have to confess, but around 20 minutes of it that covered this topic. And I haven't got a major... He kept going. Don't trust me, he kept going for longer. I mean, I don't know quite, anyway, it was... listen, I answered the question, and that is that, it is... And Eddie sort of furthered that when he spoke to Coogan as well by saying there's no price increase. That's what it was when he fought Andy Ruiz.
they look, the people at Sky look very carefully at what price point they want to put events at, and that's what it is. And there's a number of ways of looking at it. It's a big world heavyweight title fight. Is Kubrat Pulev a sexy, glamorous fighter? No. Is he a dangerous fighter with a very, very good record and an excellent amateur and only one defeat to Vladimir Klitschko? Yes, he's a tough mandatory challenger for Anthony Joshua, who's been out a year, and it's a very important fight. And you look at the cost of pay-per-views and box office events in America, which have always traditionally been much, much higher. You've always got the choice. You don't have to get it. It's a customer's choice whether you want to. But I think that it's a box office event which is a whole sort of sparkle. It's upper level. It's got a huge undercard as well. It's a fantastic night, and it's an event. And if you want to be part of that, that's the way that it can be made. Because, as I said again, with no gate, with finances so difficult, would we rather not have Anthony Joshua fight till the spring, just like Tyson Fury's not? Well, I, for one, can't wait to see AJ back in the ring, and I'm hoping loads of people out there are following suit and will watch.
I've got kind of a twofold follow-up to that. The first being that the main issue I had with the Boxing Social interview was the kind of equivocation between Joshua against Ruiz rematch. And I know Rob picked up on this as well, the Joshua Pulev fight. Yes, Pulev is a very dangerous opponent, but the Joshua Ruiz rematch had the whole narrative built into it of whether Joshua could achieve redemption and win back his titles after the big shock that came before. This, as good as a fight as it may be, it could end up being a very competitive fight on the night, doesn't have that inbuilt narrative. I think that's maybe why it's not as attractive as its predecessor.
Yeah, look, I understand Rob's point, and it was a massive story, wasn't it, in June in the Garden when an AJ toppled to Andy Ruiz, but no one really was interested in that fight. We had to push that fight massively because it was meant to be Jarrell Miller. Andy Ruiz comes in, he's not the most aesthetically best looking. You put him in a poster or in a head-to-head, and suddenly he goes and does that, and it was also at 4 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. And Anthony Joshua, we want to get back at 10, 11 o'clock at night. We had that opportunity certainly to go at a better time out in Saudi Arabia. And of course, there was a number of things like that. That was a huge, unbelievably big operation to even go there and do something like that, which was, technically so difficult. There was many question marks because, Anthony Joshua was going straight back in, and we know immediate rematches, and White Povetkin's won, and we've seen Lennox Lewis, when he took 2.5 years to get back in with McCall, or go back in straight away with Ratman. It's very interesting when a rematch is immediate like that. Yeah. And so I think there was a lot of narrative. Of course there was in that story, and there was much interest. But you've also got to remember that Anthony Joshua is now the world heavyweight champion again. So every single Anthony Joshua night is crucial. And one slip, Dillian White got knocked cold by Alexander Povetkin. He was a mandatory, he was next in line. Look what happened. Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury were so close. We were so close to Manny Pacquiao, Floyd Mayweather for so many years. And it came, as we all know, a bit too late. And I think we want to see Joshua and Fury in a ring. And obviously that it's very important that, if Tyson had fought, Caballel or whatever, or Wilder, and Joshua fights Pulev, that they sort of win those semi-finals before the main event. Because ultimately you've got Usyk in the way now, then there's Joe Joyce coming in, there's Wilder, and there's courtroom battles and all that sort of stuff ahead. We don't know what 2021 is going to bring us. And so, all this talk about the unified and the undisputed, we don't know how far off that is. So at the moment, we know what's in front of us. It's a fight that would have sold out Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in the summer. It would have been incredible then. So, okay, there's not going to be that crowd. There's not maybe the same excitement, but it is still the world heavyweight champion and one of the superstars in world sport, let alone boxing, because of the appeal and the crossover nature he has against his mandatory challenger, who's a very, very capable fighter. As I said, he doesn't have that glamour. It doesn't quite have that narrative, but it's a really important night. And in light of sort of the situation we're in with the no gate and with the fact that it is AJ, this is what we have. We have a box office event on December the 12th, and we cannot wait. And everybody I talk to in football, for example, I know that, you know, they're so excited for it. They see AJ as the sort of, you know, the torchbearer. And, you know, Tyson Fury has got obviously a huge fan base as well himself. And in many ways has sort of climbed, the story's climbed above because of the way he's come back and the way he beat Wilder and all that sort of stuff. But, you know, you could put him one, you could put Joshua one. But, you know, certainly as far as, you know, we go at Sky, we follow the Anthony Joshua story from the word go. And we've loved working with him. And, you know, he's an ambassador. We see him as a great advocate for sport and a great role model, just like we see Katie Taylor as a fantastic role model too. And so it's not just a fight with AJ. For us, it's a huge event. He's coming back. He's coming back to be watched. And, you know, for us, it's a special night. So it's all systems go, and we're going to do everything we can in the next 11 days to make sure the build-up is as compelling as ever, and that as many people tune in as we can. And we can't always say to everybody, when the bell goes, it's up to the fighters. We can't make them do anything. We hope that it's going to be the blend that you want. We hope it's going to be a humdinger or a cracker. And sometimes you get, you know, you expect something dull and it's amazing, and sometimes it's not quite. And we remember AJ Klitschko when it was like this all the way through, and then it just sparked and got even bigger and became one of the great heavyweight fights when, you know, all the stars aligned on the night at the stadium. You know, there was probably no better night for everything to happen, you know, in Sky's boxing history than that. You know, yes, Lewis beat Holyfield for the undisputed. Yes, we've had Pacquiao and Mayweather. We've had Froch Groves. We've had all sorts of Ricky Hatton beating Costas Hugh, Frank Bruno lifting the world heavyweight title at the fourth attempt. You know, we've had huge nights for many years on Sky. We've got a history like no one else. Like no other broadcaster over here, and very few American broadcasters as well who are still in it. So, you know, HBO are not at the moment. Showtime still crack on, which is fantastic. But, you know, we try our best at Sky. We've got a very dedicated and talented teams, as you know, on the operation and production side. And, you know, we'll be putting everything we can in to make it as sparkling as possible. And we hope that people will watch AJ Pulev just like they did AJ Ruiz.
While I'm far from convinced that an extra £5 makes much of a difference to the average pay-per-view purchaser anyway, so I'm not entirely sympathetic with the people complaining, but people will look at Dubois Joyce last week and say, if a fight like that can be made with no gate for no additional charge on pay-per-view, could the AJ fight not be made with no gate but for £20 rather than 25?
I just think with AJ, it's a totally different strategy. You're talking with, you know, with Joe Joyce and Daniel Dubois, two sort of British European levels. With Anthony Joshua, talking about as I said, already a global superstar. You know, certainly one of the most, you know, infamous faces in Britain. You know, he's on talk shows. He's got so many sponsorship deals. Everybody knows who AJ is, and I think that. And with that comes a lot of finances. You know, he was paid huge money when he fought in Saudi Arabia. And, you know, it annoys me when people say, oh, you know, Joshua won't be taking a pay cut. You know, never mind. Well, I'm sure he's taking a huge reduction in what he's getting. It's not my business to talk about the money. That's the promoters and managers' business to work out monies. But, you know, that's not for us to get involved in. But I do know that Anthony Joshua will not be getting what he normally gets for this fight. And you know, everybody's had to adapt. I know that to make the Usyk Chisora fight was very hard. You know, it was all there ready to go in London at the end of May. Suddenly it's a totally different scenario. You're not going to have the O2 gate. And, you know, I've got David and Derek saying, well, what do we think we can do? And all this. I said, well, listen, you know, you've got to deal with Eddie and you've got to make sure that you're happy with the money. And ultimately that's up to you, whether you're going to take a roll of the dice with the pay-per-view, whether you're going to get a flat fee, whatever. However you do it, that's your business. We'll push it as much as we can to try and help the fighters. We want the fighters to make money. Of course we do. But ultimately, I think everybody's having to adapt. I think everybody's, you know, I think the most important thing is that fighters are getting out there and fighting. It was fantastic to see so many coming out at Fight Camp and coming out on BT shows and coming out now. You've actually got a lot of fighters and you really feel for the smaller hall shows, the grassroots. It's so tough. And it's terrible that, you know, in my opinion, that the government didn't put money towards towards boxing when they announced it. And I think it's absolutely right that Eddie and Frank have gone mad at them and said, look, writing letters and saying, look, it's not right. We need money for the amateurs and grassroots. Absolutely. But I think at the very top level, I think you've got to say Joyce Dubois is at a level, and a very good level, for a match like that. But when you're talking AJ Fury, as we've seen with Tyson Fury unable to fight this weekend, you're talking many, many millions. And I think that's really hard when you haven't got the gate, you haven't got the ability to get that sort of, there's a big hole in the pot, isn't there? So, ultimately, I'm not saying that we have to push things up on the pay-per-view side to fill that. Of course not. We're not increasing the price. It's the same as the Ruiz fight. But it is what it is. And hopefully that will help pay the fighters and make sure the fight actually, is a success. And then if that's the success, you move on. And it's complicated what happens behind the scenes. It's not easy. And I think that, there's a lot of thought that goes into each of these announcements. People just think, we're doing this on a whim, and we're just, no, it's very carefully thought out, and it's made sure that, we're a business, obviously, and we've got to make sure that we're doing the right thing for our customers and for our business. And I think that it's important that Matchroom and Anthony and Kubrat Pulev and everybody involved has that. And obviously there's a huge card on with the likes of Lawrence Okoli, and you've got Hughie Fury on the card, and, Bakoli, Ramla Ali, loads of other fighters. And I think, they've all got to get, good money as well. It's not easy. It's not easy to divvy it all up. And I think that, it's sort of, we're in a situation where, it is what it is. And that leaves the customer with the choice about whether they want to get involved. And we hope, because they're getting involved with the majority of the boxing at the moment, shown by the numbers, shown by the box office numbers and by the Sky Sports numbers, and obviously big numbers for BT, which was great to see on Saturday. So people want to watch boxing. And so it's happy days.
From your own kind of in-house forecasting, do you anticipate maintaining the £25 price, that you will get significantly fewer people taking up the offer than at £20, or will it be largely the same anyway?
Well, we can talk about that in the weeks afterwards when we know how it's done, I guess, and it takes a while, as you know, for the figures to come in their different ways. But I think people will watch this fight, because I think that it's we're at a time, Danny, where the most important thing this year has been about health and about people's security and safety and families, and we've been locked down and we've been put in tiers. And I think people are, generally they just want as much entertainment as they can. I know my kids are desperate to get back onto the football pitches and whatever when lockdown finishes tomorrow. And I just think that, they want to go and do things. And while we've got the opportunity to entertain on television, not just boxing, but as I said to you, the Sky Atlantic show, The Undoing, all the Netflix stuff, all the Sky, box set stuff, and all the sports that we're putting out, that BT are putting out, the Strictly shows, the Jungle shows, all of that, or the Castle show. But, all of those sort of things, people are being entertained. Of course, you'd have thought viewing figures, are very, very healthy at the moment, because there's not that much else to do, with, I don't know, cinemas closed and pubs and clubs and all that sort of stuff. People really have, they're sort of having their nights in. And I think that this is a chance with someone like Anthony Joshua, is to say, okay, we can't go and see him this time, or, very few might be able to if we can have that 1,000 fans in. But the majority won't. They'll want to watch it on television, and if they don't, they don't. And we're not going to say, look, that's you're never going to watch an Anthony Joshua fight again. We want people to watch it. We want people to follow his journey. Every fight's important, as you found out with Andy Ruiz. Anything can happen, as you found out with Alexander Povetkin this year, or with Vasyl Lomachenko losing. Anything can happen in boxing. You don't really want to miss it. If you don't want to be it and you begrudge it, then fine. But I think people will want to come in, and it's. Listen, I'd rather they all came in and watched, they all came through the windows and watched, and watched it all free. I mean, that would be brilliant, wouldn't it? It's not possible. And neither could the fight happen if that was the case. It's a business, and, so that's why it's a box office event. That's why it's priced. And I believe there'll be a very good take up. And I think that, it's on a day when we've got a lot of other big sport. It's, I say, a couple of weekends before Christmas, before people sort of really start concentrating on opening presents, family time, and eating the mince pies. It's a chance to really enjoy, really big sport. And I tell you what, once AJ Pulev's done, then we're into the world darts. And we know that Christmas come when the darts start. So we'll all be watching every day of that too.
So, should Joshua next year fill a stadium as he has in the past against similar level of opposition to Pulev? Obviously, we hope he fights Fury twice next year, but if it isn't Fury, is there a chance the price would go back to £20 with that gate money back in harness?
I don't know. I mean, each time we have to look at the situation, and obviously this year's situation has been. I remember back in March where our bosses said, right, this is sort of crisis talks now, and we were talking every single day about what we were going to put on our 11 channels. So every situation this year has been twisting and turning, and then you thought crowds were going to come back, then they weren't, and who knows when full crowds will come back. There's positive light, but the fact that some football stadiums will have a few in, and obviously we hope that Joshua does, and obviously into January, February that will probably increase, and hopefully, unless there's the vaccine's a problem and there's more tough lockdowns and tiers ahead. But realistically, you're probably going to look to the spring and summer before you get anything like what we were planning at Tottenham Hotspur. So I don't know. We're going to have to look at where our company is, where our customers are at that point, where Anthony Joshua is, where what if he loses to Kubrat Pulev and suddenly it's a slightly rebuilding exercise? What if Tyson Fury fights and loses? You just don't know, until it's sort of the Joshua Fury Joshua matchups that everybody is sort of working towards. We don't know. So could he fight Alexander Usyk next? Of course he could. Will that be in a stadium? Who knows? Will that be in Britain? Who knows? Will that be 24.95? Who knows? We can't make that decision now. All we know is what we've got at the moment, and that is the World Heavyweight Championship, or the majority of it. Obviously not the great WBC title that Tyson Fury has, and we wish he was fighting this weekend, because wouldn't that have been great? Tyson Fury this weekend and Anthony Joshua next, and unfortunately that's not the case. That's their business. Our business is Joshua Pulev, and we're concentrating on that now.
Before I let you go, let's look at something more positive and also look to the future a little bit.
It's all positive, Danny. It's all positive. This is the sport we work in. There are ups and downs, of course there are, but the sport is in a great place. Let's not kid ourselves. British boxing's in a great place. We've got the two great world heavyweight champions from Britain. As you said, Billy Joe Saunders this week. You've got Callum Smith fighting, Canelo. You've got huge amounts happening for British boxing, and in world boxing, you've got some sort of shifting of the times a bit. You've got Gervonta Davis coming through. You've got Vasyl Lomachenko sort of being beaten by Teofimo Lopez. What happens next with Lopez? Will Ryan Garcia come through? There's all sorts of sort of interesting things that are happening around the world in boxing. And women's boxing is just incredible. Seeing our scholar Savannah Marshall become the world middleweight champion with one of the greatest performances of the year, I thought. So there's some fantastic stuff going on. Katie Taylor dazzling again, looking 21. Never know what she is. Absolutely fantastic. And I think that's a really important part as well, that women's boxing is doing so well. So I think, for the fact that we've come out of this year and put so much on, I think everybody's done well. I think all promoters and broadcasters should give themselves a pat on the back and have a happy Christmas. So there's nothing much negative going on, Danny.
With that in mind, the vast majority of box office events, certainly in the last year or so, have been headlined by big heavyweight clashes, which is great to see. Everyone loves heavyweights. Do you foresee next year, and maybe you can pick some out, some non-heavyweight potential Sky box office main events?
Good question. I like to see, listen, what if Callum Smith, upsets the odds and takes out Canelo? Tough ask. Even if he puts up a great performance and doesn't win, he comes back. I mean, there's fights with Billy Joe Saunders. Is Golovkin going to come over here? Could we get Canelo over here? There's huge amounts of possibilities. Has Kell Brook come to the end? Does Amir Khan want to fight anymore? Is there that, Khan-Brook fight that, seems to be way too late and all that? But look, we'd probably all watch it again, wouldn't we? There'll be interest in it because it's two guys that we've always wanted to see in a ring together. I mean, we've all got our opinion on what happened with Tyson and Roy Jones and whether we like it, don't like it, just don't want to see it. But ultimately, lots of things are going on. There was the YouTube boxing too. So I think that the heavyweights remain the glamour division. And if you look at the likes of AJ and Fury and Wilder and Dillian, and you've obviously got Joe Joyce coming in now, Alexander Usyk making a big name. You've got, other heavyweights that we've seen, the likes of Ruiz, Parker and Povetkin and various others. There's lots of sort of, you could sort of shake a sort of, balls in a hat around in a bag and pull out, and you could have, a number of really good heavyweight fights.
Don't give any more ideas.
Yeah, but that's, you could literally. But I think, at other levels, of course, you've got other fighters. I think the problem we've got is that, I guess fighters like Carl Froch and George Groves, because of their Wembley fight, and maybe Kell Brook and, one or two others, over the years, Amir, David Hay obviously made it onto the box office stage. Ricky Hatton sort of went all the way through, Joe Calzaghe by the end. But, you've got to sort of really build a career. And I think that we need, the likes of your Boatzis and your Josh Kellys and Conor Benn's doing really well with numbers, but will he go far? We still don't know yet. Can he go all the way? I don't know. Listen, it's all about characters, personalities, and obviously whether they can fight. So, could I see other box office events next year not involving heavyweights? Of course I could. I've spoken to Billy Hogan who's the top man at Anfield at Liverpool. I obviously I'm a big Liverpool fan, and for years we've done a lot of that. We've done a lot of outdoor stadium fights, and we haven't done anything at Anfield. And I've always believed that Liverpool's a fight city, and that it would be an amazing night at Anfield if we could do that. And and I'd love to see sort of Callum Smith headlining against a Golovkin, a Canelo, a Billy Joe, a Eubank, whatever, and put the other Smiths on. Maybe get even Paul to come out of dust them up, and whatever. And you can certainly, there's huge amounts of Liverpool fighters. Jazza Dickens, of course, on the golden contract this week, who, if he wins that, there's loads of great sort of names that you can put on that show. So, there's lots of ideas. And, could you do some sort of open air shows with other fighters? Of course you could. It depends on sort of, boxing moves very quickly. It depends on sort of, where we are next year. But I certainly think there are non-heavyweight box office events that we can talk about. The trouble is they've got to cross over to the casual fans in many ways. If they're just trade names, it's harder. So we sort of want to build them up on Sky Sports. That's when we know if we've got good numbers for Casey Taylor or good numbers for Conor Benn or good numbers for Billy Joe this weekend, then we know that there's a sort of, a big core base who'll watch that, who might travel there. And that's what we did with Ricky. That's what we did with AJ. From the beginning, we had both of those. And when we felt it was right, that's when we moved it from Sky Sports to box office. And obviously both of them became extremely successful, both, in terms of fighting power and also financially. So, we've got a good track record with it. I believe we do box office events like no other. And, we're going to keep maintaining that we choose the right ones to do. White Povetkin will obviously be the rematch there. Povetkin White 2 will be the first big one of next year. And then let's see where we are. Let's see what happens this weekend. Let's see what happens with Billy Joe. Let's see what happens with Anthony Joshua. Let's see what happens with the Canelo Callum situation. And it's the great thing about box office is that we don't have to make any decisions. It's like, okay, if we think, okay, in the spring we can make that happen, or Chris Eubank comes back against Billy Joe or something, then there's loads of things. Not Chris Eubank Senior, of course. I'm talking about Junior. But listen, who knows in this world, Chris this crazy world, what's going to happen?
Perhaps, as you've now mentioned.
No, thank you. When Nigel Benn was trying to come back, it's like, for me, like with Tyson and Roy Jones, it's just it's not for me. I'm glad that Mike Tyson, when he told me about 15, 20 years ago that he'd be dead in a gutter by the time he was 40. I'm glad he's not. I'm glad he's in a good place in his life, and he's looking physically well, and he's challenging himself. Do I like what I saw the other night? Not particularly, but at least he's in that sort of position, and it's tough for ex-fighters. But it's a young man's or a young woman's sport, and I think that that's what we've got to look at. Where are the next stars? Where are the ones that are really going to attract? Look at our digital audiences and see who really appeals. Dillian's very big on digital, so is Conor Benn. So it's interesting sort of, who attracts that digital, social, younger audience. And, we look at those. And I also think the women's game, as we said already, is just, going to such a high level now. And, Katie Taylor's fought on box office, but she was almost a joint top with White and Povetkin. Okay, that was the lead. But, I wanted to make sure that there was a fantastic fight for Katie Taylor. They're talking about a mandatory and all that. I wanted to make sure that there was a really, really good fight as a sort of double header. So, Katie's not far off. And I think that, there will be one or two box office events in the next 2 or 3 years that might surprise people. But I can certainly see not just all heavyweights. But while the heavyweight world is alive and kicking and fantastic, we're all happy, aren't we?
Great stuff. Well, Adam, I think I've taken up enough of your time. Although you're stuck in isolation, so really you should be thanking me, I guess, for
what I try and do, Danny, is something every hour to get me through this. So you've done the 3 to 4, and then I've got something now 4 to 5. So thank you for keeping that hour going and keeping me entertained. You've done your shift. You've asked the good questions as you always do, and we'll speak soon, my friend.
Thanks, Adam. Take care, and I hope the show goes well on Friday.
Thanks, Danny.